It seems like people are giving away prizes left and right, and I am no different. So this bottle of wine is from the official distributor in Healdsburg, which is between Napa and Sonoma, of Game of Thrones wine. And the reason I have this is because maybe there's some fun in my presentation that may or may not be related to that show. So this will be given out at the end. So I hope everybody is super pumped after lunch and awake and paying attention, because someone's going home with that. And I'm sorry for people who have checked luggage. So, all right, so I just wanted to actually tell everybody I am super honored to be here. I have had an amazing time. So I don't know about you guys, but I think the content has been phenomenal. And I am just really hoping that I can impart some wisdom or help for you guys. But I feel like I've gained a ton here from others, and actually any one of you could be up here as well, and I know that I would take a lot back. So I just want to thank all of you for all the great relationships I built, for all the speakers who, gosh, I was taking photos all day yesterday, all day today, and so I really appreciate that, and that really goes to the ClientSuccess team for building such a great agenda. So thank you so much for all of that. And one of the common themes that we've been talking about is actually CS evangelism. And I think we're all very familiar with that, and we really understand that. And I'm here to actually talk a little bit about how we evangelize that internally within our organizations. And it's something I care a lot about. And maybe that stems back from my background. So I was a swimmer for about 17 years. I swam through college. I was a distance swimmer, swam all the events no one wanted to swim, the mile, 400 IM. Anyways, I graduated from Stanford. I started in nonprofit. I worked for a company called Scholarship America, and then randomly ended up working in Washington, D.C. At the Pentagon, and I worked in strategic communications. And I loved both of those experiences, completely fantastic. I think what I was missing, though, is that personal touch. With people, with customers, because I'm a natural problem solver, like many of you, and I want to make sure that people are successful, because I don't think success is finite. I think all of us have the chance to be successful, and so when I look at what customer success can provide to our customers, it's that actual success. And so here at Medrio, actually, I have the chance to do that every day. So Medrio is a clinical trial software company. So what we do is we try to actually speed up the clinical trial process and make sure that we get drugs, medical devices, or other things to market quicker to impact humanity. And I'm really lucky because I get to marry my passion for people and my passion for having impact in the world in one job. So it's pretty cool. So I'm going to be talking about customer success evangelism, CS, Game of Thrones style, and I'm super excited to do this. So for those of you who don't know Game of Thrones, don't worry. I'll just give you a brief overview of what it is. So it's a fictional story, and it's about all these different houses or families that are vying for this throne, this Iron Throne, because the one person who sits on that Iron Throne rules all the families. And meanwhile, there's these monsters or White Walkers up north, and they're threatening the whole society. So, whoa, what's going to happen, right? That's the premise of the show. So first, before we jump into all the fun with Games of Thrones, let me just talk a little bit about what I mean by CS evangelism. The zealous advocacy for a cause. That is so cool, right? It's like motivating. I'm a really passionate person and an optimist, and so when I think about evangelism, it means we have to be passionate. That zealous advocacy for what? For change, creating change. So in our organization, it really means getting people to look at customer success not as a division, but as a philosophy, as a value, and that's something that I think we all know, we've heard many times today. And so it really requires creating change in our organizations and kind of inspiring that movement of change. I know we talked about those antibodies, right, in yesterday's presentation, and this is the how, like how do we go about doing that? So let's talk about our company houses. We have first, house of sales, right? And their strengths, they're a known entity. It's easily measurable, right? They tend to be the loudest, most heard, and most understood. Some of their weaknesses, okay, people are probably gonna give me a hard time, incentivized by quota. This is not necessarily a weakness, though in some cases, if you're only generating new business and you just have to hit that number, we do realize that sometimes that results in overselling, right? Or getting the wrong customer. So it is a little bit of a weakness there. And typically they only care about the new business generation. They're not really managing the post-sale relationship. Let's talk about House of Marketing. House of Marketing, pretty awesome, because it's also measurable. There's thousands upon thousands of tools that help us to measure the efficacy of marketing. I mean, we saw in Patrick's slide, I believe, that whole big slide that's with all the tools that are supposed to help us do what we're supposed to do, right? That allows us to measure marketing and its efficacy in our businesses. So they also drive awareness and brand, and that's something that we want to drive, is awareness about that. The weakness is that it's typically tied to sales. And most marketing doesn't have the budget to support what I believe is the 90% of the relationship, which is post-sale. Engineering, House of Engineering. Their strength, they build the product, right? They're actually building the infrastructure to make sure that it's successful. They're really good at bug blasting too, and making sure bugs don't get out. However, some of their weaknesses are exactly that. If we release things into the product that has a lot of bugs, that's a poor user experience. And what's interesting is for key accounts or strategic accounts, oftentimes we have to go right to product or engineering, and have them fix something, and that's expensive operational resources. I don't know about you guys, but engineering resources in Silicon Valley are pretty expensive, and having them work on bugs instead of the new exciting product things, it's not a really great use of operational resources. Now, House of Product, huge strength. They innovate. They build for customers. They design all the new features and capabilities to solve problems. At the same time, if they're not listening to our customers, which I think, again, in Patrick's presentation, we talked a little about what product thinks they're building and what they're actually building for, they can be a little bit misaligned. And then, of course, there's us, customer success. And we drive value for the customers. And we build relationships. We build champions. We increase that brand awareness. And we have the potential to rally the company around the customer. Now, our weaknesses were kind of relatively unknown. So the board, maybe to the C-suite, we're thought as a cost center and not necessarily a revenue generator, which makes it hard sometimes to get budget. And then we're actually forced to react to a lot of situations, especially when all of these houses are not aligned. And so this is typically what happens. Here we are, we're all fighting over this throne, which is budget, it's attention, it's power, and it's people, right? Because we're trying to fight over all this stuff. We have limited resources, so who's gonna get heard? Meanwhile, oh no. We have White Walkers or churned customers in our case. And we have poor reviews. We have negative feedback online. And we have people going to your competition. This is not good. And no one's paying attention to that because they're too busy fighting over the throne. So here we are, heroes in customer success, and we actually have the power to rally sales, engineering, marketing, and product around the customer. And it becomes that philosophy. We want to create that value. Customers are at the center of what we do, and we have to work together and align our divisions in order to deliver on that. And so this is going to be your arsenal on how to do that. So data, data, data. I think it's been mentioned quite a few times already, but I'm a huge data advocate. And I think the best way for you to be able to evangelize is first, understand what's going on with your customers. You have to get into the weeds and you have to analyze what's happening. Why are customers churning? Are they churning differently in different segments for different reasons? It's really important for you to understand that. And if you don't have that data, just get started. I have called up customers and asked why they're leaving, written down the reason, and put it into an Excel sheet and then created different buckets around it. And it's super powerful, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But these are the things that you need to go in and start creating today. And you can do this with your teams pretty easily. And I always love this quote, never theorize before you have data. Invariably, you end up twisting facts to suit theories instead of theories to suit facts. So get your data together. We've talked about segmentation. Here's a quick example. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but that is something that you need to do with your data sets to make sure you're understanding what's going on with different types of accounts. And this was something that I believe Whitney brought up as the global head of SAP and how they discovered that they needed to do different actions or take different actions with different customers. We talked about it with our maturity index models and things like that. This is super important. Beyond that, you need to classify the types of things that are going on with your customers. I'm going to use churn here, but I also think people should classify growth and success reasons. So I like to bucket things not only by the reasons that we might see, but then by different departments. Because churn is not something, or growth is not something, that any one department can do alone. So while we talk about reporting out on those metrics, everyone plays a role in that. And so it's really important to classify those reasons, I think, into a department to actually then visually show what's going on. Which I suppose brings me to my next point. You have to be clear, you have to create clear, concise, and impactful stories based on your data. So what you want to do is create some talking points. What is your data telling you? What's it telling you by different departments? Have a story that backs that up. So here's an example. We have an issue with house sales. Here's our problem. 34% of churn was due to actually poor sales. And then of that, 74% was due to poor product fit. Now, if you have that classified out, doesn't that start to kind of paint a picture of what we might need to do about it? I think having data to back up what the problem is super helpful. And then what you want to do is actually have an example to back up that data a little bit further. So it's great. I could go to sales and say, hey, we have this problem. Here's the numbers, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't mean much unless I think there's a story to back it up. So this story may or may not have happened at a company that I may or may not have worked for. But we had sold to a customer in 2015. And 3 weeks later, the customer told us that they felt like that they had been oversold, that the product was not working for them. And guess what? We didn't really have a way to undo that. So a bunch of resources, engineering, executive resources, CSMs, support, all were working with this customer for 8 months, and it still churned. So when I think about that, that's a lot of wasted resources that maybe could have been avoided in the first place. And so when you have your story and your data together, and you have clear examples, you've got to communicate it. And what's really great is you want to be able to create these stories and communicate it based on your stakeholders. And then you can use every single interaction to communicate with every single stakeholder and how it applies to them. And I think that this is super important because coming from a communications background, it requires many times to communicate something to have it actually get through. And I love the quote below. The two words, information and communication, are often used interchangeably, but they signify quite different things. Information is giving out, and communication is getting through. And that's what we're trying to do, is build the story, the talking points, the examples, so we can actually get through to other departments. We talked a lot about breaking down silos. This is the way that you do that. It's not just about going in and saying, hey, you need to do better. It's about showing and explaining how we can do better. Now, I think that having a story, having your talking points, and having an example is awesome. But sometimes that comes off a little bit like whining. And I don't know about you guys, but I tend to be someone who likes to be more solution-oriented. I'm a problem solver. And actually, I don't mind working with other departments to come up with what is the right solution. So you should have a solution in mind, in the back of your head. How are we going to solve this problem? But be open to having that conversation with other leaders, having that conversation with other colleagues. Because what you might think is the right solution, they might have other ideas. But the point is to work together to find a mutual solution. Because having that mutual plan bridges those silos and bridges those gaps, and it allows people to have more of a collaborative effort around it, which is exactly what you want. And make sure you write that down, and then you start moving towards it. So let's go back to our example with house sales, where the problem seemed to be overselling. What are some of the solutions? Well, perhaps we just need better sales training. Okay, that's kind of easily solvable. That's maybe a midterm to long-term solution. Maybe we incentivize sales differently, right? To best fit customers. We heard a lot about that in different examples, and other companies who've taken advantage of that. Maybe CS does need to say no. And maybe there are things on here that I haven't even captured. But having a solution and coming forward with a solution is really important. So now you've gathered your data, you've created clear and concise talking points and stories, you have examples. You also have communicated that to other people and started that conversation, and you've brought to those stakeholders an actual solution, which is fantastic. So what do we need to do next? Except for executing and starting again. So once you actually start to execute, you actually just have to act on it. You've built this plan, you've got a solution, now start to move forward. You have to mobilize for the small wins, right? If something can be done quickly, why wait until tomorrow? Get it done. Start spreading the word to other people and start moving forward with it. For the longer term stuff, put a stake in the ground. Put a date on it of when you plan those things to be implemented, and try it. And then also, of course, measure. Is it actually working? I think that's really important. I think people have emphasized that a lot over the course of this conference, is making sure that we're measuring that impact and we start again. So it definitely becomes really cyclical here to me, where you're gathering data, you're creating your talking points, you're explaining those to people, and you're communicating over and over again. You've got the solution, and then you're measuring its efficacy. Now, I actually have a real example of putting this to practice. So a few years ago, I was running the customer success team for a company called Searchmetrics. And we had done a really great job of building that team from the ground up. And it was super exciting because we were bringing in all of these new customers. We had reduced the amount of churn from about 35% to 20%. And so we were feeling pretty good after that first year. And in the second year, we saw reductions in that first quarter, probably down to around 14%. But I can tell you it started to tick up over time. And it was pretty frustrating. We had just had a turnover in our CEO, and I would say about 8 months after, we were struggling getting that churn down and kind of solving some of these problems, when our new CEO came on, he wanted to talk to different people in the organization. And so he was running 50 interviews with people globally, because this is a global company. It was based out of Berlin. And I think I was number 49 or 50 on his list to talk to. And so I remember I had 20 minutes of his time, which I thought was pretty great. But I also realized I needed to be pretty pointed in what I was going to be telling him. And I think I must have prepared for hours for this 20-minute conversation. How am I going to explain what I think is going to be impactful to him? And I didn't even know what he was going to ask, by the way. I just was like, I need to be able to communicate what is going on in our organization and what I see, which was actually that customer success was treated as a division and not really a company value. And how was I going to tell him that? So I went through these steps. And so I had something to actually communicate to him. And so in my 20-minute call, he did ask me, what do you think is the one thing that Searchmetrics could do better? And I had ready to go, well, I think you have one major issue, and that is customers are not the center of our company. I said, we create customer success like it is a division, and that everything that has to do with customers falls into customer success. And I said, and that's a problem because everyone plays a role in making customers successful. And our 20-minute conversation actually turned into an hour and 20 minutes. Then again, people knowing me know I'm quite loquacious, so it's not a surprise then either. But what was awesome is that in that next year, he actually took that as his own personal mantra to fix. And what was even better is that he realized in order to visualize this for our company and get the rest of the company around it, we needed a platform, we needed software, we needed solutions actually to visualize that, which is the benefit of, say, a company like ClientSuccess, right? They provide that visualization, the way to mobilize the company around the customer. And so the end result is, once you align these houses, no one is fighting over this anymore. Instead, we are rallying the entire company around this and then driving towards happy. So I really appreciate the time, and I wanted to spend a couple minutes about the bottle of wine here. So what I'm going to ask everybody to do is to tweet at me tagging ClientSuccess and our conference, and the first person to tweet at me something that they learned, I'm pretty sure I have my Twitter handle up here, it's Costella, gets this bottle of wine. And so I really hope you guys are enjoying the conference as much as I am, and then whoever gets to it first, you'll get the bottle of wine. Ready, go. Oh, here's a takeaway slide too for folks. It's really hard to read.